Welcome to the Tea Mind. I'm Erica, and this is your weekly pause to put the kettle on, slow down, and reconnect with what really matters. Welcome to the Tea Mind podcast, and today's episode is all about beginner's mind, and we are doing it with white tea. Today I am drinking Rose Petal Purify, which is gently detoxifying with delicate rose and lovely white tea, blended with just a little bit of Thai ginger to help warm you up and boost your digestion. So white tea, because it's so delicate and subtle, it's perfect for slowing down with, because that subtleness really forces you to pay attention to the moment and to the tea. So we're working towards a 3-minute tea routine that you can do while your tea is brewing this week. A simple mindfulness practice about drinking your tea like it's the first cup of tea you've ever drunk. So the aim is to pause so that you can switch off the autopilot and maybe see things a little bit differently this year. So as the years go by, we often get really used to living, so much so that we almost stop noticing that we're actually living our lives. We've got the same routines, the same thoughts, often the same behaviours as well, day after day. And it can become really predictable year after year. They just seem to whiz past and get faster as you get older as well. But it can be difficult to notice when things start to feel maybe just a little bit flat and a little bit grey round the edges. And Zen has a word for that, the opposite of that flatness, shojin, often called beginner's mind. And this is the attitude of openness and lack of preconceptions, even when you are not a beginner, which sounds lovely until you realise how rarely we actually do it. Because being experienced is socially rewarded, and we really want to be the person that knows everything about everything. But in actual fact, the more we know, then the less we actually look. And this all comes back to our attention again. If you lose that beginner's mind, that seeing things with fresh eyes, you don't just lose wonder, you lose options and possibility. You become quite predictable and stop listening properly. Maybe you stop learning and stop feeling. Everything just becomes the same, same, same. And there's a cognitive trap that fits this perfectly, the Engstellung effect. I'll link to it in the show notes below. But this is effectively where your brain keeps using the familiar solution because it's worked in the past, even when there's might be a better solution out there. It's that I'll scroll because I'm stressed, even though you know that scrolling never makes you feel less stressed. Or it's pushing through, even though you know that pushing through is really going to end up breaking you. And emotionally, it can show up as a sort of low level melancholy, not dramatic, but just a little bit grey around the edges. It can hit your creativity, your relationships, and it can make it really hard to enjoy anything without multitasking. And this really matters now when we're planning for the next few months. Do you want more of the same, or could there be some different options that might be worth exploring? And this is where the humble cup of tea comes in, the perfect safe pause for a reset. If you do it with presence, unlike me this weekend when I was at a very long rugby match outside on Sunday in the freezing cold in Scotland, and it was almost like we were standing in the middle of a really big rain cloud. It was just that drizzly and horrible. And by the second hour in, I had drunk all the tea that I'd taken with me. And if you've ever stood in the rain in Scotland watching a rugby match, you'll know how essential a hot drink is. So there was a wee stall selling tea, so I went and got a generic cup of tea, standard rugby issue, very beige, lukewarm, fitted my beige mood. And I was sipping it to try and stay warm, but I wasn't really there. I wasn't really present. I was thinking about all the things that I had to do instead, keeping one eye on my daughter and mentally just juggling everything else. So my body was in one place, but my brain was managing a million different other things. And then I took a sip of my tea and it had gone cold already. And it was as if that cold beigeness was really just starting to seep into my bones. Quite depressing. But it wasn't the just that the tea tasted awful. It was that feeling of realizing that I'd been there the whole time, but I hadn't actually been there. One minute I had a hot cup of tea in my hand, and the next minute it was cold, and I couldn't even tell you what it tasted like when it was warm. And yes, it was only a £1 cup of tea, but it didn't feel like it was about the tea. It was more about just a reminder of how easy it is to wish your life away and to miss that actual important act of actually living. Later on that day, we got home, and my husband and I shared a pot of tea. So it was the same day, same person, same brain, but it was a completely different feeling. This time, we actually slowed down, picked a teapot that accompanied the mood, picked the tea leaves that we really wanted, chose a nice cozy space to sit, and I realized that the beauty of a pot of tea in particular is it gives you a little pocket of time. It gives you a container, not an endless space, but just enough space. Just enough space to have a conversation for the length of time it takes us to drink this pot of tea. And somehow that can make it easier to settle. So my shoulders dropped without trying to force it, and I just let out a big sigh like I was letting out all the drizzly afternoon May just disappear. And it didn't suddenly fix everything, but it brought me back to what was real, feeling that warmth in my hands, the taste of the tea, and really being back in the room and back to my life. And this is why tea really works for me. I think it's really mindfulness that you can hold and that small ritual that really, really works because it's got that physicality, as well as the mindfulness aspect of it as well. So, attention really shapes your experience. If you're not paying attention, you don't get the moment. But there's something also deeper happening in the brain because our minds love habits, and habits save us energy. The trouble is that habits can quite easily turn into numbness, and that makes everything feel the same. But if we do something a little bit different, then that can wake us up. So, research can suggest that novelty interacts with the dopamine systems in our memory formation, including the hippocampus. And you don't need to chase novelty like an adrenaline junkie. You can just create it by changing how you pay attention. And that's the really clever bit. Beginner's mind is that novelty without the chaos. I remember years ago someone asking me to cross my arms, and I crossed them just like I always did, left over right, without thinking about it. And then they asked me to cross my arms the other way and to see what it felt like. So I did, and it felt really weird at first. So yeah, if you can, if it's safe and you're not driving, try it now or try it later. Just try and cross your arms the other way. Just that bit of novelty really makes you stop and think about what other things you do on autopilot. That if you just stopped and paid attention, there might be a different way to do it. And mindfulness practice also links to changes in brain networks involved in mind wandering and attention regulation, including the default mode network. And this all matters because this mind wandering is where anxiety and rumination like to set up their camp. And tea brings you back, it gives you that little sensory anchor to step you out of that loop and just sort of bring your awareness back to the present moment and to what matters. White tea helps here as well for a simple reason. It's really delicate. It's minimally processed, typically just withered and then dried. So it really invites you to slow down and notice the small notes and those minute details, which is very useful when you're trying to train presence in yourself. So what's the shift then for the coming months ahead? I suggest it's not about trying to become a completely new person. It's more about going from somebody that's saying, I already know how this goes, to somebody that says, let me actually see it. So going from expert to witness. And this beginner's mind or shojin is described as openness and lack of preconception, even when you are really good at something at a really advanced level. And that's the whole point. So when you live like an expert, the world starts to shrink in on itself and you label things and move on. But when you live from a beginner's mindset, your world starts to expand and new possibilities open up just because you have been brave enough to show up. And hopefully by doing tea routines for a few weeks or months, you can see how valuable presence actually becomes. And I still find it hard day after day. It's much easier to scroll than to lean into what I'm actually feeling. Because when you get present, you might notice that you are scared or sad or tense or lonely, whatever the feeling is for you. And scrolling is a brilliant way to not notice that, but it's not going to help you solve the problems. So tea helps me do presence with boundaries. It's a bit like going to the gym. You don't always want to go. I certainly don't want to go, but I do always feel better afterwards. And I think that's the real invitation here, just the practice to show up. Not to be mindful all day, but just to return more often than you run away. So, this week's tea routine, then, I invite you to choose a white tea of your choice, and we're going to drink it together as if it's your first cup ever. So, you can go ahead and either make your cup of white tea now, or if you are driving or out running or walking or whatever, you can listen along and then do the tea routine at a time that's appropriate for you. So remember that white tea is delicate, so you want to leave the kettle off the boil just for a few minutes, just to let it drop down to about 80 degrees. And then just set yourself a timer for 3 minutes while your tea is brewing. And then just first of all, just look up, holding your cup, looking at the colour of the leaves. And then as your tea brews, notice the steam or the lack of it, and set an intention that you're going to drink this tea as if it's the first time you've ever drunk tea. No assumptions, just a complete beginner's mindset, like you're a child drinking it for the first time. And then take a moment to just really smell your tea, smell the leaves, smell the liquor, and notice what your brain does. Maybe it starts planning it out or overthinking things. Just notice without trying to change anything, just name it and then come back to your breath and to the scent. And then just try and sit with that presence, just focusing on your breathing. And if you've got thoughts coming in, just notice that they can drift away, just like a cloud drifting away in the sky. Just coming back to your tea, maybe holding it in your hands, feeling the warmth. Just coming back to your breath. And whenever you're ready, you can take a small sip of your tea just in your own time. And don't try and analyze it or rate it. Just notice, where do you feel warmth first? So where do you feel it traveling into your body? What's the first flavor that shows up? And notice what happens in your body. Maybe you feel like you've taken a bigger breath, or your shoulders have dropped, or something's relaxed a little bit more. And then just ask yourself this one question. Where am I living like an expert right now? Where am I rushing past my own life? And then just pick one small place that you can maybe soften today. Just one. And you can sit with that for a few moments or however long you need. And notice that this is all about building a practice and an awareness, using tea as your cue to have a beginner's mind and an open mind. So if your day is a little bit drizzly, cold, and a bit grey around the edges, you don't need to try and make it all sunshine and rainbows, but just try grounding yourself with a pause for tea. Switch off that autopilot and come back to the present moment. So do let me know how you get on this week. And if you know someone who's stuck in their own head lately, really busy, anxious, a little bit melancholy, maybe send them this episode their way and let them know that you are thinking of them. See you next week. That's it for today. I hope something landed. I hope something lifted. And if it did, share it with someone who needs a pause too. If you enjoyed this, you'll love the Tea Mind Substack, where the kettle's always on and we can connect more deeply. Until next time, stay present, sip slowly, and thanks for listening.